Welcome back in. You're watching Talk of the Town, and we've been having a great show today. Right now, we're going to do a little recap for you. About half a year ago, we had somebody very special in our studio interviewing with our very own Robin Zimmerman, and we're going to catch up with the author of There's Something Wrong With Us. She's here in our studio today. Kathryn Purcell is joining us. Nice to see you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So for our viewers who missed it, this book that you've written, There's Something Wrong With Us, a daughter's story of mental illness, loss, and healing. We had the opportunity to catch up with you, and I want to make sure we do a little recap on the book and how things are going.
Well, thank you. It's a memoir, and it's set in Greenville, South Carolina, and I talk about growing up in a family with mental illness, generations of mental illness. And it affected my immediate family with a sister who was bipolar, diagnosed later in life, but my mom who was very narcissistic. And I want to describe what I mean by that because it's an overused word, I think. She was not capable of giving a lot of affection or empathy or approval. And that in turn caused a lot of emotional abuse on the kids in our family. We grew up with a low self-esteem. So I share that because when I was researching the book, I realized that emotional abuse, according to the experts, is every bit as damaging as physical or sexual abuse. And they put the prevalence at about 1 in 7 kids by the time they're 18 will have experienced that.
Wow, and that's a pretty staggering statistic in terms of prevalence, but also just what you're saying here, the impact that it can have. It can be very damaging and might not be something that's as widely talked about, so it's great that you're doing that in your book here today. Some heavy topics that we're tackling here in the book.
Yes.
But we want to talk a little bit for folks who haven't read it yet, what to expect, because you say even though there's some tough things in here, it's really not a downer.
Yes, and believe it or not, the way I dealt with the adversity was to reach out to others, and God placed a lot of wonderful people in my path, and they encouraged me and supported me, and that's the nurturing I really needed to deal with that adversity. And I do it with a lot of humor because I tend to like to laugh. I love to laugh. I got that from my dad. And so I weave a lot of humorous stories throughout the book. I think it was a coping mechanism for me. You know, they always say if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. Or
right, the emotion's coming out one way or another.
That's right.
Sometimes it feels better to laugh. In fact, your editor said it reads like a novel because of the humor, the historical facts that you weave in. So a read that's very enjoyable as well.
Well, I hope so.
That's great. Let's talk about how people are reacting to this. So they're reading the book, you're doing some talks. What are people saying?
Well, it's interesting because people want to share their stories with me. If I'm doing an interview or just a presentation and we take Q&A from the audience, a lot of times people will raise their hands and they want to share their experiences, whether or not it was with a narcissistic parent or whether it was just mental illness that ran in their family and the impact that it has. And it's equal between men and women. I was thinking it would just be a women's topic or book, but men are coming up and telling me the same thing.
Isn't that interesting, finding that maybe outlet, somebody to relate to, is really bringing people's stories out. And so obviously a good book for folks, 1 in 7 it sounds like, that can relate. We got less than a minute, but I do want to touch on the last third of the book that sort of takes a turn dealing with a wrongful death suit.
Yes. My sister died unexpectedly at the hospital after a surgical procedure, and it took bringing a wrongful death suit in order to get the hospital to explain to us what happened. And that took a really negative, it was a horrible impact on my family because we were already dealing with that mental health issues. And that the whole dynamic of having that not being a very close-knit family. So that took a big toll on us.
Absolutely. Well, some heavy topics, but sounds like a great read for folks, whether you've got some experience with mental illness in the family or not. Some good messages in here. So thank you so much for sharing. Again, the book is There's Something Wrong With Us by Kathryn.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And thank you. We'll be back with more coming up next.